My name is Annie Roberts, 28 years old, interior designer. The man who would have been my father-in-law slammed a leather briefcase on the table and said, $200,000. Sign the NDA and disappear. A girl like you has no place in the Lockwood bloodline. You're nothing but middle-class noise that will embarrass my son and ruin everything we've built. I didn't touch the money. I stood up and walked out. 3 hours later, I was at Chase Bank depositing my $2,900 paycheck, a completely normal Tuesday errand. What I didn't know was that Charles Lockwood had already paid a private investigator to photograph me leaving that bank and make it look like I had taken his bribe. The next morning, the photo landed on Nathan's desk with a note. She took it. Nathan called me and started laughing. "Annie," he said, "let's give my father exactly what he thinks he just bought." And that single sentence was the moment everything they thought they controlled began to burn. If this already has you angry and hooked, hit that like button right now. And drop your city and the exact time you're watching this in the comments. I read every single one. Only subscribe if you want to hear how this story completely explodes. Because trust me, it does. I met Nathan Lockwood in July 2024 at the Chicago Architecture Biennial. I was presenting a sustainable residential redesign project, adaptive reuse of a 1920s warehouse into family housing. He stopped at my booth. Most developers who paused that day were looking for cheap labor or trendy buzzwords to steal. Nathan asked actual questions. What happened to the families after move-in? How the heating costs compared to traditional builds? Whether the materials held up in Chicago winters? We got coffee. Coffee became dinner at Lou Malnati's. Dinner became 18 months of building something I thought was solid. He worked for his family's company, Lockwood Properties, third-generation real estate development, the kind of firm that shaped Chicago's skyline in ways most people didn't notice until a building went up and suddenly a neighborhood changed. Nathan was VP of Development. He'd joined after business school, worked his way up the way you're supposed to when your last name is on the letterhead, but you still want to prove something. I liked that he cared what happened after the ribbon cutting. Most developers moved on to the next site. Nathan wanted to know if the retail spaces on the ground floor actually attracted local businesses, if the residential units above stayed occupied, if the building became part of the neighborhood or just sat there like a monument to itself. We were different in the ways that felt complementary. He came from money that had been money for 3 generations. I came from a contractor father and an accountant mother who taught me that you build things right, or they collapse, and you track every dollar or you lose control of your life. Nathan had gone to private schools and business school. I'd worked my way through state school, student loans paid off 2 years ago, still driving my 2018 Honda. But we both believe the same thing. Buildings are where life happens, and if you're going to design them or develop them, you'd better care about the people inside. He proposed in June 2025 at the opening night of the Chicago Architecture Biennial, in front of an installation I'd designed. He gave me his mother's ring, sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, white gold band. His mother Diane had died 8 years earlier. Cancer. And Nathan almost never talked about her except to say she was the only person in his family who'd ever asked him what he wanted instead of telling him what he should want. I said yes before he finished the sentence. My father shook Nathan's hand at the engagement dinner and said, "You're getting the best person I know." Nathan had looked him in the eye and said, "I know, sir. I know exactly how lucky I am." My dad, Jack Roberts, retired contractor, hands still rough from 40 years of building other people's houses, smiled at that. My mother, Beth, cried. My brother Owen made a joke about finally getting rid of me. My sister Claire, still in college, asked if she could be a bridesmaid. It was one of those nights where you think, this is what family is supposed to feel like. Charles Lockwood didn't attend. He was traveling, the official story went. He sent a card 2 weeks later. It said, congratulations, and nothing else. No signature that felt personal, no mention of meeting me, no welcome to any kind of family. Just a printed card with his name at the bottom. Nathan said his father was like that. Formal, distant, uncomfortable with emotion. I said it was fine. I'd meet him eventually. There was time. I should have known then. Men who can't show up for joy don't stop at absence. They show up for control. I'd been at Sterling and Hunt Design Studio for 5 years. Started as a junior designer making $48,000 a year, working on other people's projects, learning how to read clients who said they wanted modern but meant expensive looking, clients who said cozy but meant small budget. I learned how to listen to what people didn't say, how they lived, not just how they wanted to appear. By 2025, I was a senior designer making $78,000 with my own client list. 15 completed projects, 3 industry awards, a portfolio I was proud of because every single space in it worked. The Morrison family's Oak Park kitchen, where the island became the actual center of their life, not just a design feature. The Evanston couple's living room, where I'd figured out they needed the couch facing the window, not the TV, because what they actually wanted was to watch their street, their neighbors, life happening outside. Helen Sterling, my boss, told me once, "Annie, you have something rare. You see people, not just spaces. That's why they trust you." I'd built my career on that trust, person by person, project by project. I wasn't making Lockwood money, but I was making a living doing work I believed in. What I didn't know was that Charles Lockwood had already hired someone to research me, my salary, my family's tax returns, my student loan payment history, my credit score. Every detail he'd need to calculate exactly what he thought I was worth. Lockwood Properties occupied the 35th floor of the Willis Tower. The lobby had photos from 3 generations. The grandfather who'd started the company in 1952, building post-war housing. The father who'd expanded into commercial real estate in the 70s. Charles, who'd taken over in 1995 and turned it into a $650 million operation. In every photo, the men smiled, except Charles. In every photo, Charles looked like a man taking inventory. Nathan's office was 3 doors down from his father's. Smaller, north-facing instead of the corner view. He'd told me once, "My grandfather built buildings people needed. My father builds buildings that make statements. I want to build both." I loved him more for that distinction. But there was one person who never smiled in any of those photos, in any of our dinners, in any conversation where the future came up. Charles. And I was about to find out that control mattered more to him than his son's happiness, his grandchild's existence, or any concept of family that didn't serve his purpose. My phone rang on a Monday afternoon in December. I was at my desk at Sterling and Hunt, finishing a client presentation, paint samples and fabric swatches spread across my drafting table. The number showed up as Charles Lockwood. First time he'd ever called me directly. I picked up. "Hello? Annie." His voice was formal, the way you'd address a vendor. "I'd like to discuss some matters privately. Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? Just the 2 of us." Just the 2 of us. The phrase landed wrong. "Tomorrow?" I repeated. "Yes, the Capitol Grill, downtown. 12:30. I've made a reservation under my name." He paused. "This is best handled discreetly." Discreetly. The word hung in the air like a threat dressed as courtesy. I could have said no. I could have asked what this was about. I could have told Nathan immediately. Instead, I said, "I'll be there." Because part of me wanted to hear him say the quiet part, loud. That evening, I mentioned it to Nathan casually, while we were making dinner in our Lincoln Park apartment. Pasta carbonara, his favorite, the kind of Tuesday night routine that felt like proof we were building something real. Your dad called, I said, stirring pasta water. Asked me to lunch tomorrow. Nathan looked up from the cutting board where he was mincing garlic. My dad called you? Directly? Said he wants to discuss some things. Privately. Nathan's expression shifted. Surprise, then something that looked almost like hope. That's actually good. Maybe he's finally coming around. You know, wanting to get to know you better. Plan wedding stuff. I nodded. Didn't voice the thing my gut was screaming. Text me after, okay? Nathan said. I want to hear how it goes. I promised I would. I went to bed that night knowing something was coming. I just didn't know he'd make it transactional. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Navy dress my mother had bought me for job interviews 3 years ago. Simple silver earrings. Professional, but not submissive. Nathan kissed me goodbye, still hopeful. Good luck. I think this is him trying. I took the red line downtown, walked through December cold to the Capitol Grill on North St. Clair, arrived at 12:28. The hostess smiled. Reservation name? Lockwood. Her smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes changed. Recognition, deference, the shift that happens when money walks through the door. Right this way. She led me past the main dining room to a private room in the back. Wood paneling, one table, a door that closed, away from windows, away from witnesses. Charles was already seated. He didn't stand when I entered. Thank you for coming, Annie. Not warm, transactional, like thanking a vendor for showing up to a termination meeting. I sat down. Of course, though I'm curious what this is about. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Let's call it a clarification of expectations. There were no menus on the table. A single leather briefcase sat beside his chair. Hermes, cognac color, the kind of object that costs more than most people's monthly rent. He had a glass of scotch already poured. Nothing for me. We won't be ordering, he said. This won't take long. Then he opened the briefcase. I saw more cash than I'd ever seen in my life. $200,000 in $100 bills, banded in stacks of 10,000 each, 20 stacks arranged neatly, precisely like an exhibit in a museum of everything I wasn't supposed to want. $200,000, Charles said. Not an offer, a statement of fact. Tax-free. Cash if you prefer, or wire transfer to any account you specify. He slid a document across the table. 9 pages, legal letterhead, tabs marking signature lines. A non-disclosure agreement. You will not contact Nathan, speak about this family, or attempt any future connection to the Lockwood name. You will relocate, preferably out of state. He placed a Mont Blanc pen on top of the papers. The notary seal was already affixed to the final page. I've identified opportunities for you in Seattle, Portland, Austin. All respectable firms. You'd do well. I looked at the money, then at him. Why? This isn't personal, Annie. He took a sip of scotch. It's business reality. I'm in negotiations with Belmont Investment Group, a $180 million development that will define Lockwood Properties for the next generation. Preston Belmont is old Philadelphia money. He values certain assurances. Family alignment. He said it like that was supposed to mean something to me. Preston has a daughter, Victoria, 29, Wharton MBA, excellent pedigree. She and Nathan would be well suited to each other, both personally and professionally. Your presence complicates that alignment. He gestured toward the money. You're a talented designer, I'm sure, but you come from a working-class background. Your profession is creative but not substantial. Your family. He paused, choosing words. Your family doesn't bring anything to the table that Lockwood Properties needs. The phrase hit like a slap. Not unsuitable, not wrong fit, doesn't bring anything. This money represents more than you'll make in 3 years, Charles continued. It's more than fair compensation for 6 months of your time. You'll sign the NDA, tell Nathan you've realized the relationship isn't right, and relocate within 60 days. He slid another paper across the table. Talking points. Literally a script of what I was supposed to say to Nathan. I've realized we want different things. The pressure of your family's expectations is too much. I need to focus on my career. Word for word. Like I was an actor hired to break his son's heart according to a screenplay. The deal with Belmont closes March 15th, Charles said. This needs to be resolved before then. Cleanly, quietly, no drama. He'd planned this for weeks, maybe months. While Nathan and I were planning a wedding, choosing flowers and arguing about guest lists, Charles Lockwood was planning my erasure. I stood up. No. Charles blinked. Annie, be reasonable. This is more money than... No. I turned toward the door. You're making a mistake, he said. His voice had an edge now, the first crack in the professional veneer. I stopped. Looked back. The mistake is thinking I'm for sale. I walked out. The door closed behind me. The December cold hit my face like proof I was still real, still standing, still me. I didn't touch the money. Not $1, not one piece of paper. I'd refused him on principle. Not pride. Principle. There's a difference. What I didn't know was what would happen next. What Charles would do when someone told him no. Outside, the December wind off Lake Michigan cut through my coat. I walked without direction. Past Millennium Park, past the bean reflecting winter gray sky. I ended up at a bench near the ice skating rink, watching families glide in circles. A mother teaching a small child to balance, teenagers racing, a couple holding hands. Normal Tuesday afternoon. Normal life. My phone buzzed. Nathan, how's it going? I stared at the screen. How do you text? Your father just offered me $200,000 to disappear from your life. How do you say that without it sounding insane? I typed, weird lunch. Talk tonight? 3 dots appeared immediately. Weird how? Everything okay? He wants to talk to you about something. Let's discuss when you're home. Okay. Home by 6. Love you. Love you too. I sat on that bench for over an hour, watching strangers live their normal lives while mine had just been appraised and found wanting. The cold seeped through my coat, but I didn't move. I was processing, cataloging, remembering every word Charles had said, every detail, because some part of me already knew I'd need to remember. At 3:30, I looked at my phone, realized I still had my paycheck in my purse, $2,900 before taxes, my December payment from Sterling and Hunt. The bank closed at 5. I needed to deposit it. Chase Bank was 6 blocks away. I walked there slowly, hands in my pockets, trying to feel normal again. The bank was moderately busy for a Tuesday afternoon. I waited in line behind a man depositing a business check and a woman arguing with the teller about a fee. When my turn came, the teller smiled. Her name tag said Jennifer K. How can I help you? I slid my paycheck across the counter. Deposit, please. And I'd like to withdraw $120 cash. Of course. She processed the check, handed me a withdrawal slip to fill out. Any fun plans for the holidays? I tried to smile back. Wedding planning, actually. Oh, congratulations. When's the big day? June. My voice sounded normal, like I hadn't refused $200,000 3 hours ago. Like my future father-in-law hadn't just tried to buy my absence from his son's life. The transaction completed at 3:47. Receipt printed. I folded it and put it in my coat pocket, next to my keys and lip balm, and all the other ordinary things that proved this was still an ordinary day. I walked out of Chase Bank at 3:52, receipt in hand, thinking about what to make for dinner. Thinking about how to tell Nathan what his father had done. Thinking about anything except the fact that my entire future had just been reduced to a number on a briefcase. I didn't look behind me. Didn't notice the man with the camera sitting in the Starbucks across the street. Telephoto lens aimed at the bank entrance, photographing every moment. I didn't know that Charles Lockwood had hired that man 2 weeks earlier. Not to follow me after I said no, but before. To document my life, looking for dirt, finding nothing. And when I walked out of that restaurant without signing his papers, Charles had sent one text, "Make it work." And Kenneth Garrett, private investigator, did exactly that. I took the red line home, got off at Fullerton, walked the 3 blocks to our apartment building. The 3rd-floor walk-up with exposed brick, and the kitchen where Nathan and I had learned to cook together, where we'd had our first real fight about whether to get a cat, where we'd told our families we were engaged. I unlocked the door at 4:40, put my purse on the counter, looked at the client files on my laptop, the Morrison kitchen remodel, paint swatches I needed to review, tried to focus, couldn't, made dinner instead. Chicken stir-fry, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary, trying to process what had happened through the repetitive motion of knife on cutting board. Nathan came home at 6:08, earlier than his usual Tuesday arrival. He found me standing at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, staring at nothing. "Hey." He kissed the side of my head. "How was lunch?" I turned off the burner, looked at him. "Your father offered me $200,000 to sign an NDA and leave your life forever." Nathan froze, keys still in his hand. "He what?" "Cash in a briefcase. Literally, with a script of what I was supposed to say to you when I ended it. And a list of cities I should move to." My voice was steady, calm, facts. "He said I'm middle-class noise that will embarrass you and ruin everything the Lockwood family has built." Nathan set his keys down very carefully, sat down at the kitchen table. "Annie, tell me everything." So I did. The private room, the briefcase, the $200,000 in banded stacks, the NDA, the talking points, the mention of Victoria Belmont and business alignment, the calculation that I could be removed from the equation for a price. I said no, I finished. I didn't touch the money. I walked out. Nathan was quiet for a long time. Then, "Why didn't he just talk to me?" "Because you would have said no, so he tried to make the problem solve itself." "You're not a problem, Annie. You're the person I chose." His voice was tight, controlled fury underneath. "And he went behind my back to pay you off like you're some kind of—" He couldn't finish the sentence. We sat there at our kitchen table, dinner getting cold, while the reality settled. Charles Lockwood had tried to buy me out of his son's life, and I'd refused. And neither of us knew what would happen next. We talked for hours that night, about control and money, and what family means when one person decides they own the definition, about whether we should confront Charles or wait, about what this meant for us, for our future, for the wedding in June. "I want to marry you," Nathan said finally. "Whatever my father thinks, whatever he does, that doesn't change." "I know," I said. "Me too." What we didn't know was that while we were talking, while we were deciding how to handle this, Kenneth Garrett was at his office in Schaumburg. He was uploading photos of me at Chase Bank. He was writing a report that turned a routine Tuesday errand into evidence of betrayal. He was fabricating the story Charles had paid him to create, and in less than 14 hours, everything would change. I went to sleep that night thinking the worst was over, that I'd stood up to Charles Lockwood and walked away with my dignity intact, that we'd figure this out together. I had no idea that the real attack hadn't even started yet. Wednesday morning, December 17th. Nathan left for work at 7:30, normal routine. kissing me goodbye, saying we'd figure out the Charles situation together. I got ready for work slower than usual, still processing yesterday. Still feeling the ghost weight of that briefcase full of money, the calculation in Charles's eyes when he'd tried to price me out of existence. I didn't know that at 8:42, an overnight FedEx package arrived at Lockwood Properties, addressed to Nathan Lockwood, VP of Development, delivered to the 35th floor by building security. Nathan's assistant mentioned it when he arrived. Overnight package on your desk, marked personal. Nathan opened it in his office, door closed. Inside, 4 8x10 glossy photographs, a 2-page investigative report on Garrett Investigations letterhead, and a handwritten note on Charles's personal stationery, the kind with embossed initials, written in the fountain pen script Nathan had known his whole life. She took it. I'm sorry you had to learn this way, Nathan, but you needed to know who she really is. We can discuss next steps when you're ready. Dad. The photos showed me at Chase Bank. Walking in, face exhausted and sad, standing at the teller window, walking out with a receipt in my hand. The close-up caught my expression perfectly. Relieved, like a weight had lifted, which it had. Because I'd completed a normal errand, because I'd deposited my paycheck and was heading home, because the worst part of my day was already over. But the photos didn't show that context. They showed a woman at a bank hours after being offered money, looking relieved to be leaving. The investigative report filled in the story Charles wanted. Subject departed meeting location 12:52 p.m., proceeded to Chase Bank, Michigan Avenue branch. Entered 3:45 p.m., remained inside 7 minutes. Exited 3:52 p.m. Carrying bank envelope and receipt. Behavior consistent with cash withdrawal following financial transaction. The last line was circled in red pen. Withdrawal slip visible in subject's hand. Amount consistent with payment discussed at meeting. I never had a withdrawal slip. I had a deposit receipt. But Kenneth Garrett had been paid to see what Charles wanted him to see, and he'd delivered. Nathan looked at the photos for 6 seconds. Then he started laughing. My phone rang at 8:50. I was at my desk at Sterling and Hunt, coffee still steaming, laptop just booting up. Annie? Nathan's voice was strange, light, almost amused, completely wrong for what he was about to say. Did you take my father's money? I froze. What? No, I told you about the lunch. I know you didn't. He was still laughing. That edge of disbelief that sounds like humor but isn't. But my father thinks you did. He sent me proof. Except the proof is photos of you at Chase Bank yesterday depositing your paycheck, which you texted me about at 4:15. So these photos are real, but the story he built around them is completely fabricated. My coffee cup was halfway to my mouth. I set it down carefully. He's framing me. Yes. And Annie, the fact that he's willing to do that. What else is he willing to do? What else has he already done? The question hung there between us, heavy with implications neither of us had fully processed yet. Don't change anything, Nathan said. Act normal. Like we don't know he sent this. I need time to think. But Annie, he just made the biggest mistake of his life. What do you mean? He thinks he's destroying you. He's actually showing us exactly who he is, and we're going to document all of it. That evening, Nathan came home at 6:15, earlier than usual for a Wednesday. He was carrying his briefcase, the leather one I'd given him for his birthday. He set it on the kitchen table and pulled out a manila envelope. I want you to see what he sent me. The photos were worse in person, glossy, professional quality. My face captured in perfect detail the exhaustion, the relief, the moment of normal life that had been weaponized against me. The investigative report was 2 pages of careful lies, true facts, the time I entered, the time I left, the 7 minutes inside. wrapped around a fabricated narrative. Behavior consistent with cash withdrawal following financial transaction. And Charles's note in his own handwriting, she took it. I pulled my bank receipt from my wallet. Timestamp 3:47 p.m., deposit $2,900, withdrawal $120, placed it next to the investigative report that claimed I'd taken $200,000. The contrast was stark. The truth versus the lie, sitting side by side on our kitchen table. He can't let you be the person who said no, Nathan said quietly, tapping the photos. Because if you said no to $200,000, what does that make him? The man who tried to buy his son's fiancé like she was a problem with a price tag. I stared at my receipt, at the proof of what I'd actually done. So he created evidence that I'm exactly what he accused me of being. Yes. Nathan opened his laptop, pulled up Illinois recording consent laws on the screen. And that means he's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. He turned the laptop so I could see. Illinois is a two-party consent state. You can't record someone without their knowledge, but there's an exception. If you inform them you're recording for documentation purposes, it's legal. I can record him, Nathan said. I just have to tell him I'm doing it. And if I frame it as learning from you, Dad, documenting our business discussions, he'll probably allow it. You want to record your father. I want to know what else he's hiding. Because if he'll fabricate evidence to frame you, what else has he done? What else is he doing right now? Nathan looked at me. Let's give him exactly what he thinks he bought. Let's act like you're ashamed, like I'm hurt but forgiving. Let him think his plan worked. And then, let's watch what he does when he thinks he's won. I understood. We were going to perform a relationship falling apart. We were going to let Charles watch us crumble, and while he was watching the show, we'd be documenting everything else. We need burner phones, I said. Encrypted messaging. 2 separate lives. The one he sees, and the one that's real. Nathan smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just realized their father was the kind of man you had to outwit, not trust. Tomorrow I'll buy a burner phone, set up Signal. All our real communication goes encrypted. Regular texts and calls become performance. He pulled out a notebook, the black moleskin he used for project planning, wrote timeline on the first page. We document everything. Dates, conversations, evidence. We build a case. A case for what? I don't know yet, but if my father is willing to frame you for refusing his bribe, he's capable of worse. And I want to know what that worse is before we decide how to handle this. We weren't just defending ourselves anymore. We were investigators in our own lives, and we had no idea what we were about to find. Thursday, December 18th. Nathan bought a Samsung burner phone at Target during lunch. $45, prepaid, impossible to trace to either of us. Set up Signal that evening, encrypted messaging with disappearing messages set to 24 hours. We created code phrases. Normal day meant nothing to report. Interesting morning meant new evidence. Can we talk later? Meant urgent. Meet in person. Our regular phones became theater. My text to Nathan on Friday. Still feeling overwhelmed about everything. Need some space. His reply. I understand. Take your time. Meanwhile, on Signal. Your father called me twice today. Didn't answer. Good. Let him think you're avoiding guilt. I'm setting up the first recording this weekend. We were living double lives in our own relationship. One for the cameras we assumed existed, because if Charles would hire a PI to frame me, what else would he do? The other for the truth. On Sunday, December 21st, Nathan went to his father's house for dinner. A standing invitation, the kind of family obligation that felt more like a board meeting than a meal. Before he left our apartment, he turned on his iPhone voice memo app. Dad, I'm going to start recording our conversations, he said at dinner, phone on the table. I want to document these discussions for my own business development. Learning from you. Charles paused, fork halfway to his mouth. That's unusual. You've always said to document everything in business, Nathan replied smoothly. This is my business education. Our conversations about strategy, about deals, about how you think through problems. I want to learn from you properly. Charles considered this, then nodded. Fair enough, though I'd appreciate discretion about what you choose to share. Of course, this is just for me. Permission granted. Legal consent obtained. The recording could begin. That first dinner recording was 18 minutes and 32 seconds. Charles asked how Nathan was handling the Annie situation. Nathan said he was processing, taking time to think clearly. That's wise, Charles said. These things are difficult. But you'll see, this is better for everyone. Victoria Belmont is exactly what Lockwood Properties needs moving forward. Preston and I have already discussed the timeline. After the engagement is formalized, the Belmont deal becomes personal, not just professional. It strengthens everything. Nathan recorded every word, the casual mention of Victoria, the assumption that Nathan would simply move on to the approved relationship, the phrase, what Lockwood Properties needs. Not what Nathan needed, not what would make him happy, but what served the company. We had his voice, his plan, his certainty that he'd already won. Over the next week, I started my own performance. December 28th was Lockwood Properties' annual holiday party, moved up from its usual late January date for reasons that suddenly made sense. Victoria Belmont would be there. The new arrangement needed to be visible. I attended because Nathan insisted it would look stranger if I didn't. I wore black, simple, no jewelry. Arrived at 6:45, left at 8:20. Alone. When Charles approached with a scotch in his hand and that satisfied smile, I barely looked at him. Annie, I'm glad you came. Nathan insisted. My voice was flat, empty. I hope you're finding clarity about things. I met his eyes just long enough to let him see what he wanted to see. Shame, guilt, defeat. I'm figuring things out, I said. He actually smiled, lifted his glass slightly like a toast to my surrender. I left 20 minutes later. Texted Nathan from the car. That was harder than I thought. His reply, you were perfect. He thinks he's won. On Signal. Every cold look I gave you in public was another lie he believed, and every lie he believes gives us more room to dig. We were building two realities, the one Charles saw, where Annie Roberts was slowly imploding under guilt, and the one we lived, where we were systematically documenting every conversation, every assumption, every piece of evidence that Charles Lockwood was more than just controlling. He was desperate, and we were about to find out why. Late December brought more than just holiday lights and year-end work deadlines. It brought exhaustion that wouldn't lift and mornings where I couldn't look at food without my stomach turning. I thought it was stress at first. The situation with Charles, the performance we were maintaining, the secret alliance with Nathan while pretending our relationship was fracturing. Stress could do strange things to a body. I'd been sleeping by 9 p.m. when I was usually a night person, waking up nauseous before I'd eaten anything. My period tracking app showed I was late. 5 days, then 7, then 10. Last period November 24th through the 28th. Expected cycle December 22nd. Now it was December 30th. During my lunch break, I walked to CVS 3 blocks from Sterling and Hunt, stood in the family planning aisle for 10 minutes, reading the backs of boxes like they'd give me different information than what I already knew. I bought 2 tests, paid cash, which was irrational. No one was tracking my CVS purchases, But paranoia had become a reasonable response to a situation where my future father-in-law had paid someone to photograph my Tuesday errands. The tests stayed in my desk drawer all afternoon, through client calls, through email responses, through Helen asking if I was feeling okay because I looked pale. "Just tired," I said. "End of year." I took them home in my purse. Didn't tell Nathan yet. If I was pregnant, I wanted to know for sure before we added another variable to an already impossible equation. Saturday morning, January 3rd. Nathan went to the gym at 7:30. His weekend routine, the kind of predictable schedule that made him easy to love and also easy to plan around. I sat on our bathroom floor at 8:15. White subway tile, cold under my legs, 2 pregnancy tests on the edge of the sink. Instructions said wait 3 minutes, so I waited, watching the displays like they might change if I stared hard enough. Both tests said the same thing: pregnant. I did the math on my phone. Period tracking app. Last period, November 24th. Conception likely, November 20th through 22nd. Today was January 3rd, 6 weeks pregnant. Due date calculator. August 20th, 2026. I was pregnant when Charles opened that briefcase. Pregnant when he said I had no place in the Lockwood bloodline. Pregnant when I walked out without touching his money. Pregnant when Kenneth Garrett photographed me at Chase Bank. Pregnant while Nathan and I formed our alliance, while we started recording conversations, while we performed our relationship's slow death for Charles's benefit. I was carrying his grandchild, and he'd tried to pay me to disappear. The timeline hit me in waves, each realization colder than the last. I was still sitting on that bathroom floor when Nathan's keys sounded in the door at 9:20, home earlier than usual from the gym. He called my name. I couldn't answer. My voice had stopped working somewhere between the positive tests and the math that made it real. He found me there, saw my face, saw the tests on the sink edge. "Annie?" I looked up at him. "I'm pregnant." Nathan knelt beside me on that cold floor, his gym shirt still damp with sweat, his face cycling through shock and processing and something tender that made my chest hurt. "How far along?" 6 weeks, due in August. I watched him absorb this. "Nathan, I was pregnant when your father tried to pay me to leave." His whole body went rigid. "You didn't know." "No, but he didn't know that either. He just assumed he could erase me, pay me off, frame me for taking his money, while I was carrying your child, his grandchild." Nathan pulled me against him, hand moving instinctively to my stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet, just cells dividing in a way that would change everything. "What kind of man?" His voice broke. Couldn't finish the question because we both knew the answer. The kind of man who valued control over blood. The kind of man who'd negotiate his son's marriage like a business merger. The kind of man who'd fabricate evidence against an innocent woman because she'd refused to be bought. We sat there on our bathroom floor while morning light came through the small window and the reality settled into our bones. "This changes everything," Nathan said finally. "I know." "The timeline. We can't let this play out slowly. We need to finish this before you start showing." He was already calculating. "You're 6 weeks now. You'll show around 16, 18 weeks. That's February. Early March at latest." "We accelerate." "Yes." He looked at the pregnancy tests, still showing that unambiguous word. "Now we're not just protecting us. We're protecting our baby. And I'm going to make sure my father knows exactly what he almost destroyed." The stakes had just changed. This wasn't about a relationship anymore, about whether love could survive family opposition. This was generational. This was about the kind of family our child would grow up knowing. The kind of grandfather they'd have or not have, the kind of legacy that got passed down or got burned to the ground. "He can never be part of this," I said. "Our baby." He can never be part of their life. Not after this. Nathan nodded. Then we make sure everyone knows exactly what he is. Not just us. Everyone. We spent that Saturday organizing what we had. 7 recordings from the past 2 weeks. Charles's increasingly comfortable discussions about the Belmont deal, about Victoria, about moving forward after Annie. Each recording showed a man who believed he'd successfully eliminated an obstacle, but we needed more. We needed to know what Charles was really hiding, why he was so desperate to control Nathan's marriage, what made the Belmont deal so critical that he'd risk everything, including his relationship with his son, to secure it. On Monday, January 5th, Nathan went back to work with new purpose. He had legitimate access to Lockwood Properties files. He was VP of Development. Project budgets, vendor contracts, financial reports, all part of his normal job duties. He started looking closer. And what he found was worse than either of us had imagined. The Michigan Avenue project should have been Lockwood Properties' crown jewel. 22 luxury residential units, $48 million budget, the kind of address that defined a portfolio. Nathan had worked on it peripherally, site selection, initial permits. But Charles had kept the financial oversight close. Now Nathan knew why. In the project budget files, Nathan found a payment to Meridian Consulting LLC, $340,000 for strategic development advisory. Nathan didn't recognize the vendor name. He should have. He'd worked in development for 8 years, knew every consultant and contractor worth their fee in Chicago. He looked up Meridian Consulting, shell company, no employees, no office, no actual operations, just a Cayman Islands bank account and Charles Lockwood's signature authorizing the transfer. Then he found another. Apex Advisory Group, $215,000. Same pattern. Shell company, offshore account. Charles's authorization. Over 3 years, Nathan traced 8 transfers like this. A total of $8.3 million moved out of Lockwood Properties projects into companies that didn't exist, into accounts that couldn't be audited, into places where money disappeared. Not all the accounts were in Charles's name. 2 listed Adrienne Lockwood as joint account holder, Charles's second wife, the woman he'd married 4 years ago, in what everyone thought was late-life companionship, but now looked more like financial collusion. Nathan photographed every document, every invoice, every wire transfer confirmation, every piece of evidence that his father wasn't just controlling, he was stealing from his own company. Corporate fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement dressed up as consulting fees. On Signal, late night January 8th. I found the offshore accounts. Your father has been moving money to Cayman Islands for 3 years. Shell companies, fake consulting fees. Adrienne's name is on 2 of them. How much? $8.3 million, that we know of. I stared at my phone in our dark bedroom, Nathan sleeping beside me, trying to process what this meant. Charles wasn't just desperate to control Nathan's marriage for image or preference. He needed the Belmont deal's $180 million because Lockwood Properties was hemorrhaging money through holes he'd drilled himself. The Belmont deal wasn't opportunity. It was survival. And that made Charles infinitely more dangerous than we'd thought. The next discovery came from the Belmont deal files themselves. Nathan had access to these legitimately. The development project was his responsibility once the capital came through. The partnership agreement, the profit-sharing terms, the timeline for construction and return on investment. But buried in the supplementary documents was something else. Something Charles probably thought Nathan would never read closely because it looked like standard boilerplate. Family Alliance Agreement. 8 pages, dated October 15th, 2025, 2 months before Charles offered me that briefcase full of money. The agreement outlined mutually beneficial family alignment between Lockwood and Belmont families to strengthen partnership commitment and long-term strategic vision. Translation: Nathan would marry Victoria Belmont. The marriage would happen by December 2026. In exchange for this family alignment, the profit split would favor Lockwood Properties, 65-35 instead of 60-40. An extra 5% on a $180 million deal was $9 million over the life of the project. Charles had negotiated the terms of his son's marriage 2 months before trying to buy me out of it. This wasn't a reaction to my presence. This was a plan I'd interrupted. Annie Roberts wasn't the complication. I was the obstacle to something already in motion. Nathan found the prenup next, dated November 15th, 2025. Not for him and me, for the hypothetical Nathan-Victoria marriage that Charles had already scheduled. 26 pages. Lockwood family attorney letterhead. Terms that essentially trapped whoever married in. Any divorce before 10 years forfeited all shares in the merged company assets. Any public scandal triggered immediate financial penalties. The marriage wasn't a relationship. It was a binding contract disguised as love. He drafted this before he ever offered you money, Nathan said when he showed me. We were at our kitchen table, laptop open, evidence spreading like a cancer diagnosis. Before he framed you. Annie, he was planning this for months. You were never the complication. You were just in the way of something he'd already set in motion. I looked at the dates. October agreement, November prenup, December bribe. The timeline of my erasure, planned with the same precision Charles applied to real estate development. Demolish the obstacle, clear the site, build what you actually wanted, except I'd refuse to be demolished. The final piece came from email archives Nathan accessed through the company server. An exchange between Charles and Adrienne from September 2025, before any of this started, before I even knew I was a problem. Subject line: Restructuring timeline. Charles. Once Belmont Capital comes through, we can restructure the Michigan Avenue debt and resolve the River North shortfall. Timeline critical. Need engagement formalized by March. Marriage by December. Deal closure by Q1 2026. Adrienne. What about the Roberts girl? Charles. I'll handle it. She's not material to the outcome. Not material to the outcome. That's what I was to him. Not a person. Not his son's choice. Not even enough of a problem to warrant a second thought. Just something to handle, like a zoning variance or a permit delay. By late January, we had assembled the full picture. Charles Lockwood wasn't just controlling, he was cornered. He'd been embezzling from Lockwood Properties for 3 years, moving money offshore, using shell companies to hide the theft. The company was over-leveraged, hemorrhaging cash, held together with accounting tricks and strategic fund transfers between projects. The Belmont deal's $180 million wasn't about growth or legacy, or even the business merger he kept mentioning. It was about survival. It was the capital infusion that would let him restructure debt, cover the holes, make the books look clean again before anyone noticed what he'd been doing. And the marriage arrangement with Victoria wasn't about family alignment or social appropriateness. It was the leverage that made Preston Belmont willing to invest that money in the first place. It was collateral on a deal that Charles needed more than he needed his son's happiness or his grandchild's existence. We had 9 recordings of Charles discussing the plan. We had financial documents showing $8.3 million in embezzlement. We had the family alliance agreement proving premeditation. We had the prenup showing he'd planned Nathan's next relationship before trying to end his current one. We had emails showing Adrienne's complicity. 37 pieces of evidence total. Audio files, photographs, documents, timelines. Everything organized in folders on Nathan's encrypted laptop drive, backed up to a secure cloud, printed and assembled in 3 presentation binders. On January 22nd, Nathan turned to me in our kitchen at midnight and said, "We have enough. We could go to the board tomorrow. We could end this now." But I want to see how far he'll go. I want to document the full extent of what he's willing to do when he thinks he's won. I understood. This wasn't just about stopping Charles. It was about exposing him so completely that no one could ever doubt what he was. Not the board, not Preston Belmont, not anyone who might be tempted to excuse or minimize or explain away his actions as protective father or shrewd businessman. We wanted everyone to see exactly what Charles Lockwood was willing to destroy to maintain control. So we let the performance continue. February brought the final phase. I increased my public distance from Nathan, stopped wearing my engagement ring where colleagues could see, declined lunch invitations from him in ways that were visible, text threads in work group chats, need space messages that other people witnessed. Helen Sterling, my boss, pulled me aside at the end of January. "Annie, honey, are you okay? You haven't been yourself." I forced my voice to crack slightly. "I'm dealing with some personal stuff. Nathan and I are figuring things out." Her face showed motherly concern. "If you need time off..." "No. Work is good. Work helps." But I let my eyes fill just enough to make it believable. Helen squeezed my hand. By the end of the day, she'd mentioned it to at least 3 people. Word spread. Annie Roberts was heartbroken. The engagement was failing. Charles Lockwood would hear. On February 3rd, I sent emails canceling our wedding vendors. Salvatore's Banquet Hall, Flower and Fire Catering, Jamie Chen Photography, Urban Stems Florals. Each email polite and vague. "Due to changed circumstances, we need to postpone indefinitely." Some refunded deposits. Others charged cancellation fees. Nathan paid the fees publicly, writing checks at his office where colleagues could see, looking like a man trying to appease someone who was pulling away. February 8th, I changed my Facebook relationship status from engaged to Nathan Lockwood to single. Set it to public so Charles's friends and business associates could see. 47 comments in 3 hours. "Oh no, what happened?" "You deserve better." "Are you okay?" My mother called. We'd prepared her for this, rehearsed the script, but her voice still sounded careful. "Honey, people are asking if you're okay." "I'm figuring things out, Mom. I just need some time." "Do you want to come home for a weekend?" "Maybe. I'll let you know." Professional. Distant enough to sound real. Close enough to maintain connection. My mother understood. She'd always understood that sometimes you play the long game to win the real one. Meanwhile, Victoria Belmont made 5 appearances around Nathan between February 10th and 20th. Charles orchestrated each one with the subtlety of a real estate developer clearing a site. Office tour where Victoria just happened to be visiting her father, Preston. Lunch where she was waiting for Preston, but he was running late. "Mind if I wait here?" A charity gala where she was seated strategically near Nathan's table. Victoria was polished, professional, exactly what Charles wanted. Wharton MBA, old money breeding, the kind of woman who knew how to navigate power without looking like she was trying. She was kind to Nathan, appropriate, interested, but not pushy. What she didn't know was that Nathan was recording every interaction, that he was documenting the orchestration, that she was a pawn in her own father's game, just like Nathan was in his. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, because Charles's sense of timing was either oblivious or deliberately cruel, Victoria appeared at the same restaurant where Nathan was having a business lunch. "Nathan, what a coincidence." She smiled. It looked genuine. "I'm meeting my father, but he's running late. Mind if I wait here?" "Of course not." Small talk about architecture, about development projects, about the Chicago winter. Then, carefully, "I heard about your engagement ending. I'm sorry, that must be difficult." "Thank you," Nathan said. "It's complicated. If you ever need someone to talk to who understands family business pressures." The offer hung there. perfectly innocent, perfectly positioned. Nathan's recording device captured every word. When he played it for me that night, I heard what Victoria didn't realize she was saying. I've been prepared for this role. I'm available for this arrangement. Your father and mine have discussed this, and I'm willing. She wasn't malicious. She was complicit without fully understanding what she was complicit in. And that somehow made it worse. By late February, Charles was satisfied. Annie was withdrawing. Nathan was being appropriately courted by Victoria. The performance was working. He stopped checking in as frequently, stopped asking Nathan pointed questions about moving forward. He thought he'd won. He thought the problem had solved itself exactly the way he'd engineered. And that's when we scheduled the meeting with the attorney. Grace Feldman specialized in family law and corporate ethics, 20 years of experience navigating the intersection where personal relationships became business liabilities and vice versa. Her office was in the Loop, 14th floor, views of the Chicago River. We met her on February 22nd. I was 13 weeks pregnant by then, just starting to show if you knew what to look for. Nathan and I sat across from her conference table while she reviewed everything we'd brought. 9 audio recordings, 12 financial documents, the private investigator report, offshore account records, the family alliance agreement, the prenup, email chains, text threads, timeline spreadsheet cross-referencing every piece of evidence. Grace spread it across her table like a prosecutor building a case, which, in a way, she was. This is extraordinary, she said after 40 minutes of review. Corporate fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit fraud through the private investigator, and she held up the family alliance agreement. Documented intent to manipulate personal relationships for business gain. Mr. Lockwood, your father has created a comprehensive record of his own corruption. What's our best move? Nathan asked. That depends on your goal. Do you want him criminally prosecuted, civilly liable, removed from the company, publicly exposed? Nathan looked at me. I put my hand on my stomach. Barely a curve yet, hidden under my sweater. But we both knew what was growing there. All of it, I said. We want everyone to know exactly what he did. Not just us. Everyone. Grace nodded slowly. Then you need a public forum with witnesses who matter. Board members, business partners. People whose judgment and reaction can't be dismissed or spun. The Belmont signing, Nathan said. Final partnership meeting. Preston will be there with his board members. My father will be there expecting to close the deal. If we present this evidence, then maximum impact, Grace finished, maximum witnesses, and maximum accountability. She advised us on presentation strategy, who should speak, what order to present evidence, how to frame it not as family drama, but as documented business fraud with personal manipulation as aggravating factor. We left her office with a plan, 3 presentation binders, printed evidence organized by category, digital files ready to project, a script for Nathan to follow that was clinical, prosecutorial, irrefutable. The meeting was scheduled for March 6th, 10 a.m., Belmont Investment Offices, Gold Coast. Preston Belmont and 4 board members would be present. Charles would be there expecting triumph. Victoria would likely be absent. Her father would want to handle business first, celebration later. We had 8 days to prepare. 8 days to practice the presentation. 8 days to make sure that when we walked into that room, we had everything organized so perfectly that no one could dismiss it, explain it away, or spin it into anything other than what it was. Evidence of a man who'd valued control over family, who'd tried to buy, frame, and manipulate his way to a business deal, who'd been embezzling for years, who'd planned his son's marriage like a corporate merger and tried to erase his son's actual fiancé when she refused to cooperate. On March 2nd, Nathan called his father, The call was recorded. We recorded everything by then. Dad, I think you were right. About focusing on the business, about what Lockwood Properties needs. Charles's pause was audible. Then warmth flooded his voice. Nathan, I'm glad you're seeing clearly. I want to present at the Belmont signing our vision for the partnership. Show them why this matters. That's excellent. Preston will appreciate that. March 6th, 10 a.m. I'll add you to the agenda. See you Friday, Dad. Charles had just approved his own exposure. He didn't know it, but in 4 days everyone would. Friday morning, March 6th, 2026. I dressed in my charcoal blazer and black dress pants, cream blouse underneath. 15 weeks pregnant, small bump concealed if you didn't know to look. I'd put my engagement ring back on that morning, sapphire and diamonds catching the light. Diane Lockwood's ring, the only piece of the Lockwood legacy worth keeping. Nathan wore his navy Tom Ford suit, his mother's cufflinks, sapphires to match my ring. We'd decided weeks ago we'd honor the parent who'd loved him and reject the one who'd used him. We took a cab from Lincoln Park to the Gold Coast, held hands in the back seat. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say that we hadn't already planned, rehearsed, organized into evidence binders. Last chance, Nathan said as the cab pulled up to Belmont Investment Group's building. We can still walk away. Find another way. I looked down at our joined hands, at my ring, at my stomach, where our baby was growing. No, he needs to know what he almost destroyed, and everyone needs to see who he really is. We walked into the lobby at 9:17, took the elevator to the 10th floor. The receptionist directed us to the conference room. Charles was already there. Sitting to the right of Preston Belmont's chair, confident and relaxed. He saw me walk in and froze. What is she doing here? Nathan set his briefcase on the mahogany table. Annie is my fiancé. She should be here for this. Preston Belmont looked confused. Charles, I thought. There's been a misunderstanding, Charles said quickly. Nathan, perhaps we should discuss. Before we sign anything, Nathan interrupted, voice clear and cold. There are some things everyone needs to see. He opened his briefcase. The conference room was designed for power. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing Michigan Avenue. Mahogany table that seated 12, leather chairs. The architecture of money-making decisions. Present. Preston Belmont at the head of the table. 4 board members, Jane Emerson, Harold Vance, Patricia Crawford, Douglas Bennett. Charles to Preston's right. Nathan and me standing. Partnership documents spread across the table, unsigned, waiting for the signatures that would close a $180 million deal. It was 9:58 when we arrived. 10 o'clock when Nathan began. This will take 20 minutes, he said, and then you can decide if you still want to sign anything with my father. Nathan pulled out the first presentation binder, open to the private investigator report. On December 16th, 2025, my father invited Annie to a private lunch. He offered her $200,000 and a non-disclosure agreement to end our engagement and leave Chicago. Annie refused. She took no money. He placed Kenneth Garrett's report on the table. The fabricated narrative about withdrawal slips and behavior consistent with cash transactions. My father then hired a private investigator to photograph Annie leaving Chase Bank that afternoon and fabricate evidence that she'd accepted the bribe. Next to the PI report, Nathan placed my actual bank receipt. Timestamp 3:47 p.m., deposit $2,900, withdrawal $120. This is what Annie actually did that day, deposited her paycheck. The investigator photographed a routine errand and created a false narrative. Patricia Crawford, board member, leaned forward to examine both documents. Her face was unreadable, but her attention was complete. Nathan played the first recording. Charles's voice filled the room. $200,000, tax-free. You will not contact Nathan, speak about this family, or attempt any future connection. Then Nathan showed the timeline. December 16th, bribe offer. December 16th, P. photographs. December 17th, fabricated report delivered to Nathan's office with note. She took it. My father attempted to frame Annie as a criminal when she refused to be bought. He let that sit for 5 seconds, then continued. This raised a question. If my father was willing to fabricate evidence against an innocent woman, what else was he willing to do? Nathan opened the second binder. Financial documents. I have access to Lockwood Properties files as VP of Development. In reviewing project budgets, I found payments to vendors I didn't recognize. Meridian Consulting LLC, Apex Advisory Group, shell companies with no employees, no offices, no actual business operations. He displayed wire transfer records, 8 transfers over 3 years, total $8.3 million to Cayman Islands accounts. These companies don't exist. The money was moved offshore to hide it. This is corporate fraud and tax evasion. Douglas Bennett pulled out his phone, started photographing the documents. 2 of these accounts list Adrienne Lockwood as joint account holder, my father's wife. Total in those accounts, $3.1 million. Harold Vance was taking notes now. Jane Emerson's face had gone hard. Nathan placed the family alliance agreement on the table. This document was negotiated between Charles Lockwood and Preston Belmont on October 15, 2025, 2 months before my father approached Annie with his bribe. Preston picked it up, started reading. His face changed as he processed what he was seeing. The agreement outlines family alignment, meaning I would marry Victoria Belmont by December 2026. In exchange for this arranged marriage, Lockwood Properties would receive a 65-35 profit split instead of 60-40. My father negotiated the terms of my marriage as part of this business deal. Preston was still reading. His jaw was tight. This wasn't a reaction to Annie's presence. This was a plan she interrupted. My father tried to buy her off because she was an obstacle to an arrangement he'd already made. Nathan showed the prenup next, dated November 15th. 26 pages of terms that would trap whoever married into a 10-year binding contract with financial penalties for divorce or scandal. He had this drafted a month before offering Annie money, before framing her. This was always the plan. The room was silent except for the sound of Patricia Crawford flipping through documents, Douglas Bennett photographing evidence, Harold Vance's pen on paper. Finally, Nathan said, the reason why. Why my father was so desperate to control this marriage. Why he was willing to commit fraud to secure this deal. He showed the Michigan Avenue project financials, the River North shortfalls, the unauthorized transfers between projects to cover gaps, the email from September between Charles and Adrienne. Once Belmont Capital comes through, we can restructure the Michigan Avenue debt. Lockwood Properties is over-leveraged. My father has been moving money between projects without board approval, embezzling through shell companies, and using the Belmont deal's $180 million to cover years of financial mismanagement and theft. This deal wasn't about growth, it was about survival, and he was willing to manipulate his son's marriage to secure it. Nathan closed the binder, looked at his father. This is what you chose, Dad. This is what you built. Preston Belmont stood up. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Get out. Not loud, quiet, final. Charles started to speak. Preston, if you'll just... Get out of my office. Now. The 4 board members were motionless. Watching. Witnesses. The deal is dead, Preston said. Effective immediately. Furthermore, I will be reporting the offshore accounts to the IRS, and I will be advising my legal team about potential litigation regarding the attempted manipulation of my daughter. He looked at Charles with something like disgust. You came to me talking about family alignment and business integrity. You have neither. Charles turned to Nathan. You just destroyed everything. The company? You destroyed it, Nathan said quietly. When you decided I was an asset instead of your son. When you tried to buy Annie like she was a problem with a price. You did this. Preston was already gathering papers, signaling to his board members that the meeting was over. I stepped forward then. Put my hand on my stomach. The small curve visible now if you knew where to look. Charles saw the gesture. His face went white. I'm 15 weeks pregnant, Mr. Lockwood. My voice was calm, cold. The way you state facts that can't be argued. I was 6 weeks along when you offered me money to disappear. You tried to pay me to abandon your grandchild. You fabricated evidence to destroy me when I said no. And you were about to sell your son's future, and this baby's future, for a business deal. I let my hand stay on my stomach, made sure everyone in the room saw. That's who you are, and now everyone knows. The room was silent. Then Preston Belmont walked out. Not another word. Just walked out. The $180 million deal died in that moment. But so did whatever Charles thought he was building. Charles looked at Nathan. At me. At the evidence spread across the table. At the board members who'd witnessed everything. At the partnership documents that would never be signed. Then he left. Walked out of the Belmont offices at 10:27 a.m., the sound of his footsteps echoing in a hallway that had just watched 30 years of his legacy collapse in 22 minutes. The aftermath moved faster than I expected. Friday afternoon, March 6th, 5:30 p.m. Charles returned to Lockwood Properties, cleared his office. 27 years of personal items, photos, awards, the golf trophy from the 1998 charity tournament, the architectural rendering of his first major commercial project, packed into boxes by security, while his assistant watched with professional sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. Saturday, March 7th. Adrienne consulted a divorce attorney. She'd been preparing for this possibility since the Belmont meeting, since she'd realized Charles's fraud would implicate her too if she didn't act fast. Sunday, March 8th. Chicago Tribune Business Section. Lockwood Properties, CEO, resigns amid fraud allegations. The article was careful, used words like alleged and sources confirm. But the core story was there. Charles Lockwood had attempted to manipulate a business deal through arranged marriage. Evidence of financial irregularities had been presented to prospective partners. The deal had collapsed. Monday, March 9th, 2 p.m. Lockwood Properties Emergency Board Meeting. All 7 members present. Motion to request Charles Lockwood's resignation as Chief Executive Officer based on documented evidence of corporate fraud, misappropriation of funds, and actions contrary to fiduciary duty. Vote 7-0 in favor. Motion to appoint Nathan Lockwood as interim CEO, pending permanent appointment. Vote 7-0. The empire Charles had spent 30 years building reorganized itself around his absence in 6 days. Tuesday, March 10th, Crane's Chicago Business ran a cover story. Family betrayal or business strategy gone wrong. The tone was more sympathetic to Nathan than Charles. Young executive exposing corruption even when it was family. Woman targeted for refusing bribe. Prenup arrangements that looked more like corporate contracts than marriages. The architecture community rallied around me. Helen Sterling gave an interview. Annie Roberts is one of the most talented designers I know. More importantly, she has integrity. When someone tried to buy her silence, she refused. When someone tried to frame her as a gold digger, she documented the truth. That's who she is. Sterling and Hunt got 3 new client inquiries that week, specifically requesting me. Also Tuesday, Victoria Belmont sent me a private message through LinkedIn. I had no idea what our fathers were doing. I'm horrified. I hope you and Nathan are okay. I never wanted to be part of this. I believed her. She'd been a pawn on a board she hadn't known existed. Some people are used by powerful fathers and never realize they're pieces in someone else's game. Thursday, March 12th. Charles Lockwood formally resigned as CEO, retained 8% minority shares, non-voting, no operational role, essentially removed from the company he'd run for 30 years. Also Thursday, Adrian filed for divorce, cited irreconcilable differences plus fraud as contributing factor. Requested 50% of marital assets, which triggered a forensic accounting investigation that would take months, but would eventually reveal exactly where those Cayman Islands accounts had come from. Charles tried to contact Nathan twice in those first weeks. March 18th, a letter on personal stationery. "We should talk. You're still my son." Nathan didn't open it. March 23rd, a text. "Whatever I did, whatever mistakes I made, you're still my son." Nathan blocked the number. On March 27th, Nathan filed a petition for legal name change, Nathan Lockwood Roberts, honoring the family that had shown up, that had welcomed him into their loud kitchen dinners and overlapping conversations and genuine warmth. Distancing from the man who'd valued control over blood. The process would take months, publication requirements, court hearing, final decree. But the petition itself was the statement. The legal filing that said, "I'm choosing the family that chose me." Saturday, March 14th, Helen Sterling called me into her office. "Annie, we're making it official. Senior designer, partner track, starting April 1st. $95,000. You've earned this, not because of what happened with Charles Lockwood, but because of who you showed yourself to be when it did." I'd walked into that bribe meeting making $78,000 a year. I walked out of this making $95,000, on partner track at a firm I loved, with a client list that wanted me specifically because I'd proven I couldn't be bought. Monday, March 16th. Dinner with my family. Nathan and I drove to my parents' house in Mount Prospect, the 3-bedroom ranch where I'd grown up, where my dad had built the deck himself, and my mom still kept the kitchen exactly the way it was most efficient for making Sunday dinners. Jack Roberts, my father, shook Nathan's hand differently that night. The kind of handshake that meant something, that carried weight earned through action rather than granted through position. "You protected my daughter," Dad said. "That's all we ever wanted." Beth, my mother, cried and hugged Nathan and fussed over my barely visible bump and made too much food the way she always did when emotions ran high. Owen made jokes about Nathan joining the normal family. Claire showed us baby clothes she'd already bought. Tiny onesies with Chicago skyline prints, impossibly small socks. We sat around their kitchen table, the one that was too small for 6 people, but we made it work anyway, the way we always had. And Nathan looked around at the mismatched chairs and the loud conversations and the warmth that didn't cost anything but meant everything. Later he said quietly, just to me, "This is what I was supposed to give up?" I squeezed his hand. He never understood. Money can't build this. Thursday, March 20th, 11 a.m. Cook County Courthouse, room 2304. I wore cream, knee-length dress I'd bought at Nordstrom Rack for $180, the kind of dress that showed my 17-week bump proudly instead of hiding it. Nathan wore his navy suit, his mother's cufflinks catching light from the courthouse windows. Present. My father, my mother, Grace Feldman, Helen Sterling. The witnesses required by law and the people who'd shown up because they wanted to be there when we made this official. The judge was a woman in her 50s who'd probably performed 1,000 of these ceremonies and still smiled like each one mattered. "By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss." Nathan kissed me like we were the only 2 people in the room. When we broke apart, my father was crying. My mother was crying. Claire was crying. Owen was pretending not to cry. Grace was recording on her phone. Helen was applauding. It was small. It was loud. It was perfect. We'd planned something different once. June 14th at Salvatore's. 200 guests. The kind of wedding that looked good in photos and satisfied other people's expectations. We'd canceled all of that. Or rather, I'd canceled it while performing Heartbreak for Charles's benefit. This was better. This was 7 people in a courthouse room, 7 minutes of ceremony, and then lunch at Lou Malnati's. The restaurant where Nathan and I had our first date in July 2024, the booth where we'd talked about buildings and family, and what it meant to care about what happened after construction ended. We reserved the same booth, ordered the same deep dish pizza, toasted with water because I couldn't drink, and Nathan didn't want to, if I couldn't. To Annie and Nathan, my father said, raising his glass, to family that shows up, and to knowing that the only thing worth more than money is the people you refuse to sell out. We walked out of that courthouse married. No empire, no $180 million deal, no father's approval, just us. Just this. And somehow that felt like everything. The apartment in Andersonville was a 4th-floor walk-up in a 1920s brick building. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, 1,100 square feet, exposed brick in the living room, hardwood floors that creaked in the good way. The 2nd bedroom had morning light, east-facing window, perfect for a nursery. We signed the lease on March 28th. Move-in date April 15th. Standing in that empty room, I could see it. Soft green walls, white crib, the rocking chair my mother said she'd kept from when I was a baby. Morning light on our child's face. A room we'd chosen, in a neighborhood we'd picked. In a building that had nothing to do with Lockwood properties or legacy or any definition of family except the one we were building. Yellow walls? Nathan asked, arms around me from behind, hands on my bump. I was thinking soft green, calming. Green is good. We were starting over. Not because we had to, because we chose to. Every choice ours now. Every decision made by the people actually living the life, not by someone trying to control it from a distance. Charles attempted contact one more time. April 2nd, a phone call to Nathan's office. The receptionist asked if he wanted to take it. Nathan said no. She asked if there was a message to relay. Tell him I'm in a meeting. He wasn't. He was at his desk reviewing development proposals, learning how to be a CEO at 30 years old, building something that looked more like what his grandfather had started than what his father had turned it into. But the message was clear. There were no more conversations to be had. Nathan started therapy twice a week with Dr. Miriam Katz, who specialized in family trauma, processing the grief of losing a father who was still alive, mourning the parent he'd wished he'd had while accepting the parent he actually got, learning the difference between those losses. I keep waiting to feel guilty, Nathan told me after a session in late March, for exposing him, for ending it. But I don't. I feel relieved. Is that wrong? No, I said. You're grieving the father you deserved, not the father you had. Those are different losses. Some fathers you choose, some you inherit. Nathan was learning the difference. Sunday evening, March 30th. Our Lincoln Park apartment, half-packed for the Andersonville move, boxes labeled kitchen, books, Annie's work files, the organized chaos of a life being relocated. I found the wedding planning folder from June 2025. The original one, venue deposit receipts, guest list drafts, flower arrangement sketches, everything we'd canceled when I was performing Heartbreak for Charles's benefit. Nathan found it at the same time, pulled out another folder, newer, thinner. Actual wedding, March 2026. Inside, our courthouse marriage certificate, Lou Malnati's receipt. The photo Grace had taken of us right after the judge pronounced us married. Which one's better? Nathan held up both folders. I smiled. Put my hand on my stomach. 20 weeks now. Movements I could feel. Real kicks that proved this baby was growing strong and healthy and completely ours. The one where we chose each other over everything else. Even when it cost us everything, especially then. He pulled me close, careful of my bump, hand spreading across it like he could protect our baby just by touch. We're building ours now, he said. Our family, our way. Our foundation. The thing about foundations. Some you inherit, some you build yourself. The inherited ones come with history and weight and expectations and sometimes cracks. You didn't cause but have to deal with anyway. The ones you build yourself? Those you design from the ground up. You choose every beam, every support, every piece that holds the whole thing together. They're harder. They take longer. They require you to know exactly what you're building and why. But they're yours. And they last. I looked around our half-packed apartment, at the life we were boxing up to move to a neighborhood Charles Lockwood had never set foot in, to a building that would never have a Lockwood Properties plaque, to a future we were constructing ourselves with absolutely no input from anyone who'd tried to buy, manipulate, or control it. Some foundations you inherit, I said quietly. Some, you build yourself. Nathan kissed my forehead. We're building. In 4 months we'd have a daughter. We'd name her Diane Beth, after Nathan's mother and mine, after the women who'd shown up, and the ones who'd been stolen too soon. We'd raise her in Andersonville in the apartment with morning light, teach her that you can't buy integrity and you can't fake family, and some things are more valuable than any amount of money in any briefcase. She'd never meet her grandfather, Charles. That was our choice, our boundary, our way of protecting what we'd built from the man who'd tried to tear it down. The story would live on social media for a while. Screenshots of the Tribune article, Reddit threads dissecting corporate fraud, TikToks about the designer who said no to $200,000. People would have opinions. Some would say I should have taken the money. Some would say Nathan betrayed his father. Some would say we were both naive to think love could survive that kind of opposition. Let them think what they wanted. We knew the truth. And the truth was this. On December 16th, 2025, a man tried to buy me out of his son's life for $200,000. I refused. He framed me as a criminal. My fiancé saw through the lie in 6 seconds. Together, we documented every crime his father had committed: fraud, embezzlement, manipulation, conspiracy. We exposed it all in front of witnesses who mattered. The $180 million deal died. The corrupt CEO resigned. The young couple married in a courthouse with 7 people and more love than most ballrooms hold. And 8 months later, they'd have a daughter who would grow up knowing that some things can't be bought, and the people who try to buy them always lose in the end. That was our story. That was our foundation. And we were building something that would last. If you've ever been told you're not good enough, that you don't belong, that your worth can be calculated and dismissed, if you've ever had someone try to price you out of a future you chose, if you've ever stood in a room full of money and power and said no because your integrity cost more, drop a comment. Tell me what you refuse to sell. Tell me what foundation you're building. Because the stories we need to hear aren't the ones about who inherited the empire. They're about who built something better from nothing, who chose people over profit, who stood up when standing up cost everything. This was mine. What's yours?